What the hell does that feel like? I mean, you've come across this guy and the craft, and you how do you process that?
Well, I was scared. It definitely traumatized me a bit when I looked at him and I saw the big eyes, the large eyes. That's what really when I started to really get fearful. If he hadn't started speaking, I probably would have, ran the other direction. But the UAP task force and David Grusch had seen this, or were handed my account, and that's when everything started. Um, and that's when I realized I did need to go forward, not just because of that, but I had also told David that there's a possibility that this program, you know, might be doing some things that are, if this is first contact, they might get read in at the umbrella level, but you're not going to know what is actually going on in these places in these laboratories. Um, so I give Elon credit that yes, he's probably read in at a very high level, but if he knows any of the detail, I don't know. And besides that, I know that they have a cover story for the program for people that they don't want to know about the UFO stuff.
The following is a conversation with Jason Sands. Jason is a former US Air Force Master Sergeant and UFO whistleblower. During his 22-year service, Jason claims to have been exposed to the classified program known as the Program, dealing with non-human intelligence. In 1994, near Black Mountain, he had a life-changing encounter with a humanoid entity in a US military uniform. Now he's speaking out about what he witnessed, the discussions he's overheard about tall whites and greys, and the risks of coming forward. We also dive into disclosure today, what day two of a formal disclosure might look like, congressional hearings, his interactions with David Grusch, and what he makes of Skywatcher and Jake Barber's crew. This was an awe inspiring account from a truly fascinating man who is very relevant to the current UAP conversation. So, the following is a conversation with Jason Sands. Jason, thank you so much for joining me. I really do appreciate your time, and I appreciate you're busy. It's a good honor to speak to you genuinely. I wonder if it's okay, and I know that you've spoken a lot in the past on other podcasts and stuff about your experience, and don't get me wrong, I'd like to sort of talk through that, but I'd like to get a bit of an idea of you as a person, really. Is that okay if we sort of jump in and start your sort of childhood? What was your childhood like? Where did you grow up?
Uh, Fairly normal, did have some strangeness. My mother and sister can attest to some of it, but there were a few instances of things that we couldn't explain and visitations from people that nowadays both my mother and I both feel might have been some kind of other beings other than humans that were coming to see us from time to time. So it's kind of like one of those things where it's in my family. I think just like other people have claimed that this is something that happened to me. It's followed our family around for a while, that kind of a thing, and that's kind of what I feel about it as well.
Yeah. Okay, so at what point did you decide that you wanted to join the armed forces, to serve your country? At what stage did you sort of decide that that was your path?
It was pretty soon after graduating high school. Um, had some jobs. Moved from my dad's place in Massachusetts to my mother's place in California. Tried kind of making it out on my own, and yeah, I was going pretty slow. So I just decided, well, Air Force, I'd like to just prove to myself I could get out there and do it and achieve, retirement and everything else. And I got through it after 22 years. So I'm glad I stuck with it. It was a very good experience all around.
Yeah. And so you were, am I right in thinking that you retired as a master sergeant? Is that right?
Yes, that's senior NCO. Yeah. Mhm.
Okay. 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 So let's sort of jump forward a little bit, or jump back a little bit, I should say. At what point did you sort of become aware that the military, I guess, and the government had more information than we did on non-human intelligence, on the UFO UAP subject? At what point did you sort of realize, hang on a minute, there's something here, and they know more than that you perhaps did prior to that point?
Well, about halfway through my career, I ended up at Nellis Air Force Base, and within the first few months, I got picked up, handpicked to go into the program. And I spent 3 years in the program and learned quite a bit. But that's where I picked up a lot of the information that I had. And it was kind of mid in the middle, about my 10 year, 10 years in, that's when that occurred. So I really got exposed to a lot of, you know, really interesting things, both with what we're doing with technologies, the contact with other beings was also part of that experience. So yeah, that was, I'd say, right there around the 10 year mark in my Air Force career.
Okay. Okay. Are you able to to say, was there talk of the program before you were in the program? So was there kind of whispers, were there rumors, in a big organization, I would imagine that there would be snippets of information that sort of makes its way to other people, or was it completely just until you were in the program, there was no whispers of it, you didn't hear anything, and it
Yeah,
was,
well, yeah, there was nobody was on to us unless you got read in. So it was pretty much the commander, the lead officer, who was a captain, and then it was us four enlisted folks that were the analysts for the team. And I think it'd be very hard to detect because we used the same equipment. We always went out for 2 week missions. And we also did all the regular work when we got back to the organization, and we just fit right in with all the rest of the crowd. And all they thought was just we'd been doing a couple of weeks mission that nobody told them about, and that I never said anything, and nobody else did either. So they never got any wiser to us. And that's the way they ran for years over there. So it's just one of those things where we just looked like normal people, coming and going. And then if anybody did ask a question, that officer who was the lead for our team, if somebody started asking, well, hey, where's Jason? He'd actually defend me and say, oh, he's working on a out of cycle mission. It's special. So just leave him alone. He'll be back in 2 weeks, and everybody will just back off because that happened a lot. Sometimes you get like these missions that were normal and regular missions that were out of cycle from your annual plan of all your different teams going out. And you get caught up in a couple of weeks of, work for, some other person, but it just kind of came out of nowhere, out of the blue. So nobody ever really batted an eyelash at it.
yeah. Okay, interesting. So the let's fast forward a little bit then to the Nellis Air Force Base case, if that's okay. Are you able to sort of talk us through that? Obviously, that's quite a big case, and people are fairly well aware of that case. And I know there's some footage out there
Right.
that's circulating. It's been there for a while. What was your involvement in that?
Well, I was out of the program by that time. I had gotten out of the program earlier in 1994, but later on that year in October, in the winter, that's when the encounter occurred. So this was just us driving up to work at Black Mountain, where we would conduct training for the air crews and get them to go through the rigor of training with radio interference and white noise, and still getting their bombs on target and get their mission completed. So that's what I was there for. That's what we did up at Black Mountain. So we're heading up for the day to go train some pilots, and that's when we ran into this person on the side of the road, and I think he's an extraterrestrial because I stood no more than like 2 to 3 feet away from the guy, so I had a very good look at him. But to me, even after being in the program, this was what I would call an extraterrestrial kind of event. But yeah, he was stuck there on the range for the weekend, apparently trying to find some kind of material to repair his craft because that's what he was asking me for was some tritium, I think it was, and that's what he needed. And I didn't know what that was, and I told him, oh, the only thing I know is titanium, and he was like, no, 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 that's not what I want, but it's tritium. So when I couldn't fulfill his order to help repair his craft, he just walked off. He didn't really say goodbye or anything. Got back in his craft, and then he flew away down to the south of the range. So it was a very strange day, definitely. I initially thought he was actually dying of hypothermia because he had this bluish kind of a tint to his skin. He had very pale like albino type skin or a very pale person's skin, but it had this blue undertone. So it was very cold that day, and I thought he was dying of hypothermia, and that's why we stopped. And I thought I was going to be picking up somebody that was dying, and of hypothermia, but it ended up he was just not even from this world, kind of an event.
And this communication, was this telepathically? This was non-verbal?
Part of it was audible as well. But when he spoke, it was not my language. It was not English, but
Ah,
I understood everything that he was saying. And when I think back at that time when he was communicating, there was almost this emotional level meaning of the word that would arrive in my brain just before he would speak it. Because as you know, your brain works faster than your mouth, and things like this. So there was a slight delay there between my understanding what he was about to say and then him saying it. So there was definitely some kind of telepathic link he was using to relay the meaning of all the words, even though it wasn't my language.
yeah. Am I right in thinking I've heard, I think you talk about before, the sort of uniform was almost like a military, like an American military type of uniform. Is that right?
Yes, and that was a very strange part of the whole incident because, from a distance, he looked like one of us. He had a military uniform on and everything. But then when I jumped out of the car to help him out, he was not human.
Mm.
So honestly, thinking back at that, I think perhaps he was working in the program, and maybe he had some kind of an altercation with somebody in the program or the security forces, and he took off in one of the craft, and somehow his craft got damaged on the way, and then he ended up meeting me, later on,
Yeah.
and asking for stuff to repair his craft. So I would imagine that'd be the only plausible thing that comes to my mind as to why he was wearing a uniform.
Mm. And so you saw the craft yourself with with your own eyes.
Yes, it was just about 50 yards off the shoulder of the road, up the dirt road. It was very clear. Yeah, you could see that.
Could you describe it? Could you describe the what it looked
Yeah,
like?
it kind of had a rounded front end like a helicopter's front end. It has the big bulbous type front,
Mhm.
not the ones with the sharp noses. Um, and then uh, on either side, instead of having landing pads, that are on either side on the underneath, they actually ran it like ram's horns from the top all the way down to the bottom, and that the end of the ram's horns on either side is what the craft would rest on when it was landed. And then there's one other piece where the back of the craft was. There was like an egg-shaped flat black, about 3 foot in diameter kind of egg shape that was sticking out. That if it was the tail end of a helicopter, that's where I would expect it to be. But there was no propellers or anything on the craft itself. So it looked very strange. You're talking to a guy that has seen literally hundreds of different types of craft, and not just our own inventory, but you're talking all our allies would come get training at the Nellis test range. So I pretty much knew everything in the inventory, and this did not fit any of those
Yeah.
kinds of shapes.
What the hell does that feel like? I mean, you've come across this guy and the craft, and you how do you process that?
Well, I was scared. It definitely traumatized me a bit when I looked at him and I saw the big eyes, the large eyes. That's what really when I started to really get fearful. If he hadn't started speaking, I probably would have, ran the other direction. But because he started speaking to me, it kind of calmed me down. But ever since that event happened, yeah, I consider myself a Christian, and that I have faith, and it really rocked my world in that regard. Because at first I thought, well, shoot, how do I parse this with my belief system? Was one of the things that hit my mind for the
Yeah.
first part of it, of trying to reconcile all this. And then eventually I realized, well, wait a minute, the Bible kind of says that there were, strange people that they called sons of God, and they actually came into, like, I think the story of Abraham, or that he had invited some sons of God in, and they actually had dinner with him. And then he has a baby that also becomes a big figure in the Bible. So I'm just thinking, well, maybe God has created many other beings. And then I started to remember all the scriptures, and I'm like, yeah, that's right, because in Genesis, it mentions the seraphim, the cherubim. These are all different races, apparently, of angels. So I started thinking, well, maybe I just encountered the reality of these beings, and that's where I started parsing things together. And it also went along with, the fact that, God is love kind of a thing. And honestly, when I was having that telepathic intercourse and communication, I did feel a lot of, care, respect, calmness, even love, I would say, kind of respect, and civility that I did not have in my mind. His mind was definitely much more controlled than mine. And it does give you that sort of a spiritual, like, peacefulness while you're talking sometimes. And I felt that from him a few times while we were discussing things. And then all of a sudden he'd move and I'd get scared again and my mind would go off over here, and I'd kind of break up the conversation. So I felt like a mess while this guy was, this person I met, this extraterrestrial, was not at all scared. And I could tell he wasn't annoyed. He was just like, oh, here he goes again. He's losing his mind again. He's getting scared. I gotta wait for a minute. And then I get control of myself. So that's kind of how it went. But yeah, I definitely felt like he was much more organized with his mind and controlled. So that's something that's really lasted my whole life. I've always tried to aspire to be that controlled in thought and emotionally as well.
Yeah, interesting. Wow. So so you have that experience. You have that experience and you're trying to process it.
Yeah.
Do you tell people about this? You've had this experience. Do you tell your superiors? Do you tell other people? Are you allowed to tell your sort of family? Because would that be classified at the time, or is that because it's
No,
not?
it wouldn't be classified. It was just strange. But you're talking the 1990s, 1980s. They could take your clearance and kick you out for any old reason, and being stupid about UFOs is one of the things everybody thought was like, oh, they'll kick you out for that. So yeah, everybody kind of kept their mouth shut about strange encounters uprange. So yeah, that's kind of how it went. I just kind of kept my mouth shut. Nobody wanted to talk about it after the event. Either they didn't see what happened because they were transfixed. Because at one point I did look into the car with my with all the fellow passengers, and they did look like they were entranced or something. That they weren't conscious. They were just kind of like, zombied. Um, so either they didn't hear, see, or whatever, or just couldn't even function, and nobody talked about it. So I figured, well, I better just shut up too, and forget about this whole thing. So I did, and got on with my life.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. So you got on with your life. You sort of kept it suppressed, I guess, in terms of sort of sharing the information. And then at some point you've decided, I'm going to come forward. At what point was that you made that decision to sort of share this experience?
Well, that was when I was working on the Top Secret Network. They have a forum that, in those times, it was, or in those days, it was when the UAP task force was there, but not Arrow. The new Arrow office had not stood up yet. So this was that transitionary period, a couple of years before this all turned over or was turned over to Arrow. Um, but I was on the forum and somebody posted this event on that forum, this UFO coming onto the Nellis test range, because there's video of it. And you can go on the internet, and if you just put in the search bar, Nellis test range UFO incident of 1994, this will pop up. So you can see the craft I saw, because the previous week, that's when it came out onto the range. And it flew right by where the Black House schoolhouse where we were working. So there was a whole another team of people that saw it, from Black Mountain, and as it flew by. But if you want to see that, you can go out on the internet, like I said, and just look it up as the UFO incident at Nellis Test Range in 1994. So there's that. But anyway, on the forum, I'm mentioning this, or I'm seeing and reading all of this, because they're all just like, "Hey, did anybody see this? This is old footage of a UFO, and it's on a military test range." And I'm like looking at it, going, "Oh boy, there's more to this story, because I knew what happened the following week, and I'm like, gosh, I tossed and turned for a few weeks at least, and finally I just said, here you go. This is what happened the next week. And then everybody was like, holy crap. You know, they were like, really? And they started asking me a lot of really tough questions because there's, you know, with any form, you get the critics and you get the people that are accepting or open-minded, and you know, you get all the whole gamut. And same thing happened with this. But the UAP task force and David Grusch had seen this, or were handed my account, and that's when everything started. Um, and that's when I realized I did need to go forward, not just because of that, but I had also told David that there's a possibility that this program, you know, might be doing some things that are, you know, if this is first contact, and if Roswell happened and we chopped up somebody's family members' bodies, you know, we didn't treat them very nicely. So I'm thinking to myself, you know, Dave, I do have concerns that at least these program people that did this to these bodies and desecrated their loved ones, um, this probably puts some people at risk because they may not like this and they may be, you know, pretty pissed off, but maybe they're more civil at the same time, hopefully. And it appears they are more civil, but they haven't gone after anybody. But there is that real reality of it. And in fact, when I was on the mission, we did intercept a phone call that said exactly that, they would be coming back because they wanted their equipment returned and the biologics returned, just like we would if, you know, if a Russian aircraft was downed on our soil. The respectable thing to do is to catalog the whole thing, get the bodies back to the family members. You treat everything with respect, you know. But here we are with something that I think is even more important, is another civilization from another planet coming here, and here we are treating them like they're some kind of trash, you know, or just something cool to pick up and uh, just start playing with. So that's another reason why I came forward, was I was just like, you know, this can't be going well with that. So there's that, you know, risk to some of the people I used to work with, to their lives, is what I honestly came to, you know, the conclusion of, and that's what I told and gave to my testimony about, was this is, you know, the urgent need. I'm saying you guys have got to get in there, and for God's sake, you know, please do at least do an evaluation on them, because if they have even a few leaders that are into this horrible treatment of these craft and these peoples that might be from another civilization, we're getting something totally backwards here. And I said, I'm not pissed off at them because they made decisions right at that World War II. At the end of World War II, that's when this all stood up, I believe. And yeah, there was a lot of fear about everything being Russian. Even your neighbors were commies and deserving of going to prison just because they said something strange at a dinner party. You know, just crazy stuff back then. So, you know, maybe they made decisions and they made some mistakes, but it's time to go back and go and correct some of that. And I think that's not too much of a hard thing to do. You know, just come clean. We know you made some mistakes, and please, you know, let's just get through this. So that's what I was pleading for Congress to do, was to go out there, assess this, and if, you know, there are still some bad things going on in the program, at least assess it and get and stop it, because we don't want anybody to go rogue and continue with this sort of maltreatment of whoever these recovered crafts owners are. You know, whether you want to believe they're extraterrestrial or not, I don't care, but these are not our craft, you know. So whoever they were, they got chopped up. I don't like that, you know. So it's we're not living back in the 1940s anymore and 50s. We're I think we're big people here and adults. So we think we can get through this, and it's not going to be as bad as they think it is.
So, would I be right in thinking that you were one of David Grush's 40, I think he mentioned 40 whistleblowers or 40 people that he'd spoken to that are sort of directly
Yeah, I don't know
related?
how many. Yeah, I don't know how many whistleblowers there actually are. Whether I'm part of the 40 or 50 or 80, I don't know. All I know is he asked me to go forward to Congress, give my testimony, get my whistleblower protections and all that stuff through Congress, and I did, and I did that. And then Congress wanted me to take the next step and testify to Arrow, which I did. Then they wanted me to also testify to the Inspector General, which I did. And then the last step to legally finish everything out was to do my pre-publication because I knew I would have to start speaking publicly. And so that was the last legal step. So I got all my coverages within that time frame. But it took about a year for everything to transpire.
So you've jumped through a lot of hoops,
Yeah,
a lot of
I've
hoops.
been vetted, inspected, investigated by literally every law of the land, and it just kills me sometimes hearing from these guys online about what they think from their couch, and I'm like, dudes, you have no idea. You have, with all your criticisms, you have no idea what it's already been like. You guys cannot have possibly done a better job investigating me and my credibility than all of these other people that have already looked at me. And it just kind of tickles me sometimes that they get so caught up in how righteous they feel about bagging on me about this or that. And I'm like, people, you have no idea what I've been through.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I had this conversation actually with Richard Dolan a couple of days ago.
yeah,
Yesterday, in fact, and we were talking about, can you trust these ex-intelligence people? And it was, it was one of those questions, kind of playing devil's advocate. And his point was, how do you know? How do you know? You got to take people at their word unless you can prove one way or another, that people can't be trusted or whatever. You've,
yeah,
if we don't trust anybody because they've previously been in sort of intelligence role, then we can't trust anybody at all ever that would have been in a position to know. And that's really, that's a bad position to be in because it's almost like there's like a
right.
psyop to say don't trust anybody that's coming forward as a whistleblower. But if we,
Exactly.
if
When you look at all the evidence, I mean, yeah, I wish I could walk out of, whatever laboratory somewhere with a UFO and an alien on my back. But I can't do that. It's impossible. So there has to be a little bit of reality put into this. It's kind of like, okay, what is acceptable? Well, okay, I can prove who I am. I can prove I had the clearances I said. And I can also state to you, I've even had polygraphs, which is acceptable in a court of law. And none of them have said I've ever lied to anybody. As a matter of fact, I do pretty well on all of those tests. And it's like, well, how? And on top of that, just for, if you want to complain about me, fine. I've already been vetted. But guess what? You've got 40 to 80 other whistleblowers that just happen to have maybe even more clearances than I've ever had. And they actually have the same concerns I do, and I don't even know who they are. I mean, how many freaking witnesses to a murder do you need before you say there's something going on here? And to turn a blind eye is just complete idiocy to me. So for these people to keep on demanding with this unrealistic goal of, I'm not going to believe you until you show me the alien. I'm like, how the heck am I supposed to do that? Okay. How am I going to do that? So they think one way, but they don't understand how ridiculous it sounds. You know,
have you been keeping up, or have you got any sort of knowledge of the new Skywatcher, the Jake Barber and the Skywatcher
yeah, I
team?
know
Have
Jake
you?
Barber. Yeah,
Yeah.
I actually spoke to him about a year before he came out as a whistleblower. Yeah, he's a good man. I knew he was legit when I met him. Um, but yeah, I met him through Greer, and I knew of him, and we did kind of exchange a little bit of information about me being a whistleblower. And yeah, I'm very proud of him that he did come out and start, because I said, dude, you really know what's going on your end of what this program is. I've got my piece, but you've got a piece as well. And I'm like, you have no idea what you can do to help. And I'm glad he came forward. I really am.
Yeah. It was interesting when you were saying earlier about the way that you felt when you had this sort of communication event, and he talked about that as well. This sort of feeling of love and
Yes.
the sort of maternal
It's a
feeling of
spiritual
love.
thing, honestly.
Mm.
You feel like you've touched the face of God a lot of times. And I don't know any other better way to explain it. I mean, yeah, I know there's people that'll listen to this video of us talking, and some of them don't believe in God. But if you could just imagine, having the ability to place a level of the feeling of what real, true love is into you and into your emotional state, that's what it feels like. You're like in the presence of something that is much more loving than you could ever imagine. And you could see Jake was very seriously broke up about that. He started to cry about it. I've cried about my encounter too. It does touch you in a way that it's inexplicable unless you felt the encroachment into your own mind and your own emotional state. That kind of love. And it's amazing when you do feel it though. And it never goes away. You always remember it.
Wow. Wow. Okay. Wow, that's a lot. How do you bring that into your life as you come out of the your role in the forces in the Air Force, and
Hmm.
you try and transition back into sort of civilian life, and you've had not just, I mean, anybody within kind of a military background or a
Hmm.
active war zone or that kind of style of a job which most of us won't ever experience. So to have
Hmm.
that, which is this crazy level anyway, and then to have these experiences on top, being in the program and having these experiences, how do you sort of come out of that and transition into the everyday world, our lives?
That's a good question. I'd say I think I've learned in life, because I didn't have a good childhood. I was, traumatized. My dad was an alcoholic and everything. And you get into a kind of a state of mind where you're in survival mode. And anything as crazy as things would get in my household sometimes with the violence and everything, your mind goes to a place where it feels safe. And that's kind of what I did after this whole thing was that I kind of utilized that same sort of a technique to kind of forget about the trauma of it all and how it rocked my world. And I just put it in a part of my head where I didn't think about it, but then it started coming out when I got on this forum later on in life. And it started all coming back, not like a flashback. Some of it was like a flashback, but you just start thinking about it more. And then you realize that other people are interested in they've had experiences too. Because that happened on a top secret network. Some other people were like posting their experiences as well. So I realized, oh, I'm not alone, and it's okay to talk like this. I mean, we're on an official forum speaking about the intelligence value of all this stuff that we're hearing in the reporting. And not only that, some of the analysts themselves are experiencers. So I've started to feel more comfortable about coming out with that, I guess, and talking more about it once I saw I wasn't getting ridiculed and all that other stuff. So it kind of got more comfortable to talk about.
Yeah, awesome.
But it took a long time. But I went the whole gamut. There was a part where I was scared to talk about it. There's a time when I didn't want to know any more about it, because I knew that my pastor wouldn't accept the fact that I felt a different way about what the angels actually are, because to him they were just these fluffy cotton ball kind of creatures, and I'm like, no, they're real. I can touch them, they can hurt you, that kind of stuff. But I didn't want to get into that kind of an argument. So yeah, I just kind of kept putting it back for all these different reasons. But when that forum started, that's when I realized there's a community out there, and yeah, they think it's real too. So let me try to help them. So that's when it really kind of turned me around on whether I should start talking or not.
Yeah. Where does we've heard quite a lot about the sort of danger and the risk involved in talking as a whistleblower.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much you're able to talk or comfortable talking about, but I thought I'd at least sort of ask the question is that something that you experienced that, did you have those kind of warnings like you don't talk about this sort
Yes.
of?
Yes. Yeah. They let me know that they were breaking into my car when I was going to work at the NSA campus. You can't just get into the parking lot without credentials. So it was definitely somebody in the government opening my car doors and leaving them slightly open, even though I'm very anal about locking my cars. But here it was, three times in the space of a few months where my car's door is just opened up like somebody had popped it open, and just leaving it that way just to make sure they made them, I was getting the message that we're watching you, kind of a thing. And then later on, I actually lose my job. Um, my clearance is messed up. In other words, it's still there. I have friends that said, yeah, I can see your clearance, but they're not passing it along to the people that want to hire you, because I've been trying to get a job for 8 months now. But every time somebody gets interested and wants to pull my clearance, somebody in the Department of Defense is holding it back, going, no, we're not going to pass it. They won't give a reason why. They've never notified me, because if they've got a problem with me, there's supposed to be an official memorandum sent to me saying, you are in trouble because of this. We are therefore taking your clearance and blah, blah, blah. And until the investigation's over, you won't get it back. I never got notified about anything. So this is just a little game that they're playing, I think. And it's kind of backhanded kind of things that they do like this. And unfortunately, I'm not the only one. I've actually got other people that came to me privately and said, Jay, I'm a whistleblower too, but hey, they did this to me. And it took me 2 years before I could get a job with my clearance again. And that's sad.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's been hard. This is not an easy road. Let me put it that. I'm not getting much out of this. Matter of fact, I've lost a lot of money. I'm barely making it month to month here. I'm having to move to a cheaper place actually because of it. So no, this is not fun.
Are you able to sort of try and challenge that? I mean, is it
I
like a
have. I've
IG?
had legal people look into it. I've had numerous security officers look into it. I've had people, all kinds of people looking into this, and all of them are saying, "Oh, everything looks fine," But yeah, you see that it's in there, and they've got a note saying it's being reactivated. But here I am, passing up job after job after job because they're like, "Well, we can't get your clearance. They won't give us your clearance. They won't give it." And I'm like, "Well, what's the freaking problem?" And I've asked so many times, I'm just tired of wasting breath on it because they say the same thing over. Oh, everything's fine. Just give it time. I'm like, you realize you got to feed a family here, right? Kind of thing. And it's just like, I've had this clearance also unbroken since the 1980s. This clearance I've had top secret. Never have I ever had even a lapse, even one little lapse of my clearance going from one corporation to another. And all of a sudden now it's a problem after I become a whistleblower. I think that's quite telling.
Yeah.
So this has hurt me very badly, honestly.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, the impact is dramatic,
Yeah.
dramatic. So where do you think we go from here? Are you hopeful of, we've got the new task force with the Representative Luna, and I think it was only like 6 months or so to try and get some things through on that. How are you feeling about the new administration? What are your thoughts?
I think this is the best time to do this, to get some disclosure, or at least inspect the program the way it should be. I'm glad that Trump is also demanding that they look at declassification of documents that don't need to be. In other words, just the convenience of classifying something rather than looking at it hard and going, oh yeah, we could downgrade this. They sometimes people do tend to get lazy with declassification. So we've needed this for a very, very long time. And I'm feeling good that we're going to make some progress. Whether 6 months is long enough, I don't know. I mean, if they want to really dig up all of the documentation on this program as well as other things, it's probably going to be quite a while. They're going to need a very large team to review literally thousands and thousands, maybe even millions of documents.
Yeah.
So 6 months may not quite be enough.
Yeah.
That's at least in my estimation.
Yeah, you raised a really interesting point there around classification and declassification and over classifying things. I remember with Lula Zondo mentioned that about his things with his name in it, I think, and I know that there were sort of ATIP, the letters ATIP were redacted unnecessarily without any sort of legal
Correct.
authority to do so. And it
Mhm.
was, how do they get away with that? And you feel like from a sort of a non, Intel world, kind of just some normal dude, everyday dude in the street, you just think, surely there's a way that if somebody's redacting that without any legal exemption to do so,
Right.
somebody should flag that and say you can't do that and you're going to be punished, whatever that punishment is internally,
Correct.
slap on the wrist or whatever. They shouldn't be able to do that, but yet they seem to keep
Well, yeah.
doing it and getting away with it.
Yeah, that's the part that's hard to swallow because, like I said, we're not in World War II era anymore. If they're harming other people's careers like they've done mine, which I do know from other people telling me so, um, I don't think that's really an order of business anymore that needs to be practiced. Um, there's absolutely no reason to do that to a fellow citizen. I don't care how much knowing me upsets you and being a whistleblower upsets you. It's not for you to lord yourself and your power and authority to be able to take my clearance and mess with it like that. Because who's to say maybe you're wrong by keeping it all classified, and maybe me being a whistleblower was the right thing to do, and maybe there is some fraud, waste, and abuse going on here. Because aside from my non-disclosure agreements for all these programs, there's a higher law that I have to keep myself to, and that goes for anybody that's read into these programs. The other thing that's higher than anything else that you have to put value on is fraud, waste, and abuse, and reporting that. That, trumps any NDA that you sign. Any non-disclosure agreement is null and void at the point where you're like, oh crap, I just witnessed a crime, and that was my boss that did it. If you don't report that, it
Yeah.
just keeps on going on and on. And I think that's what's happened in the program is maybe just one or two bad eggs got in the mix, and it just snowballed after that. So
So
yeah, you're right.
fraud, waste, and abuse. That kind of that brings me to Elon Musk. I don't know if you mind me just chucking in a bit of a sideball question here, but there's a lot of speculation as to whether or not he is aware or has been read into any, because he obviously has got a rocket contract and supposedly sort of top
Mhm.
secret or some kind of clearances in order to have a
Oh,
rocket company.
even if you got read into my program that I was in the Air Force doing the reverse engineering, there is a vanilla side to that, honestly. And I would listen to that day in, day out on my missions while I was monitoring the telecommunications. Is that there's a whole bunch of stuff where there were reverse engineering stuff that we had captured from enemies. And they had like writing that they could understand. And they knew that this was an avionics pod. This was the weapons part of the system. This was the radar. It had writing on it that looked like a language that we knew. And then there's this other stuff that they had no clue what it was. So anybody who's in a leadership position, they don't need to know the detail. Okay. They might get read in at the umbrella level, but you're not going to know what is actually going on in these places in these laboratories. Um, so I give Elon credit that yes, he's probably read in at a very high level, but if he knows any of the detail, I don't know. And besides that, I know that they have a cover story for the program for people that they don't want to know about the UFO stuff and this exotic material. They actually built that into the program so that if anybody did ask, they just say, oh, here's some enemy aircraft. And yes, reverse engineering. That UFO stuff, so silly, so silly. That's kind of how they've been playing it. So, but actually, you go down to the next mountain range over, and voila, you see stuff hanging out in hangars and all kinds of weird stuff going on. So, take it and leave it. Whatever you want to believe. That's that's how deception works.
Yeah.
So I don't know if Elon does or does not. I think if he's adamantly saying that there's nothing exotic about any of it, that perhaps they didn't show him the other hangar that's over the other mountain range.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, okay, I had a question. I don't know if it's something that you would be able to talk about or to make any suggestions, and completely understand. But if you can't, one of our sort of viewers asked the question, if you asked me to ask you the question, if you could suggest to sort of citizen journalists and citizen researchers that want to kind of try and help put the puzzle pieces together,
Mhm.
what keywords would be useful to look into if you were looking at doing FOIA, freedom of information, or what areas would be good to look into if there's anything that you could say or are allowed to say that might help us in our sort of research?
Um, there's a lot of different office symbols I think that have already been listed, and even more than I could list off just right now off the top of my head. Anything like foreign technologies, uh, and acquisitions programs, those are good places to go digging because they have to be embedded because it's a military operation. At a certain level, it gets to the military, other than CIA kind of watching over the whole thing, and some other interagencies having offices in these programs. When you get to the military side, that you automatically have to have a military type of organization for that, and that's going to be telling because, for instance, the me and the other three guys that worked on the team there at Nellis, um, I was attached to a normal unit, but it had this special access program where we went out and did other stuff, and that's kind of what you're up against is that you've got all these front organizations already built into the program, and you just have to be very careful about what you see out there. But most of this was, I would say, at least at the higher levels, were in the acquisitions and technologies type offices because they could justify logistically moving equipment from one base to another. And that's the other aspect of it is that overall, these laboratories that are used to conduct tests on these types of exotic materials, these are like one-off labs. You literally have to go thousands of miles in one direction or the other just to get to a lab that can, test one aspect of this. Then it has to go another 1,000 miles to another lab and have other signatures looked at. Then it goes to the metallurgist and all. It just. But because of that, there's a lot of logistics, and those are the kind of the little paper trails you can pick up on.
Yeah.
Kind of like the Wilson memo, and things like that too. You capture these little snippets of things. Um, but it's going to take somebody like Luna actually going into the filing system and pulling this stuff out and going, okay, here we go. Oh, there's the program name, reverse engineering, got it, bop, 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 and start looking through there and see if they can dig up some more on these things. But they're going to have to actually visit the sites, is my point. You can't just do this by making gentle phone calls and expecting them to come clean. That's not going to happen. You've got to go to their place and say, what's behind that door? Oh, you're not going to be cooperative? Hello? Do you want to take care of that, Mr. Security Officer?
Yeah.
And then you go in anyway. That's what it's going to take.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we saw the difficulty, didn't we, when Congressman Gates and Luna went to I forget where it was now. Was it Right, Pat? Where,
Yeah.
yeah, I think so. And they had that, I remember Luna talking about that in a press conference. She's making some phone calls. She was very angry. They were like, "No, you're not coming in." Like we're having a, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's crazy to think that you've got that sort of hidden power behind the scenes that can tell people, an elected representative, "No, you're not coming in."
Well, that's what we're after. Because if you think about it, it's just another chopped down version of leadership. So there's very few people in between one to another at the different levels. And they're entrusted with a high degree of authority that I think back in the Eisenhower days, he actually gave them part of his presidential authority to conduct this type of business because he thought it was the right way to go. And maybe he did. I believe Holloman happened because I remember hearing about it on the missions. I heard about Holloman and meetings and things like this. But during those Eisenhower days, maybe when the extraterrestrials came and visited him, maybe this is what they wanted too. Maybe they said, "Well, we don't want to interface with the president every stinking day. Why don't you just tuck us up underneath, a piece of land that's in the military?" Oh, well, and then the response was, "Well, let's give you a piece of land at the Nellis test range, and that could be where you make your base, and we'll work together." And maybe that's what happened as it evolved. So, but I think at all the times I never got a conversation that I intercepted where this was a comfortable thing for these people, like the tall whites and the grays. I think they wanted full control of what they were going to have to do. I believe they fully did not want to touch the weapon system ever, but they would help out with like making sure that a laboratory environment had all the high tech sensing that it needed to take measurements, and then we would utilize that, but they would not touch the weapon system, and they didn't even want to see a human also in the labs. That's very telling that this was not something they were comfortable doing even in a laboratory. These extraterrestrials probably don't even like having to do even that part, but they're kind of stuck right now.
If it's okay, I'd like to speculate just slightly. If we put ourselves in a position where, I don't know, President Trump has come forward and said, "Look, I'm going to disclose some things to you today,
Yeah.
the American people to the world that this is real, that they're among us, that this is what we know," and so essentially we get that official disclosure from the president. How do you feel that it would affect us? Because I guess you've been through that. You've had that sort of day one, and then what did day two look like? How do you
Yeah.
think? What would day two look like? I'm always fascinated by this question of disclosure on day one. What does day two look like? How does it affect us?
Day two, I would suspect you would see a sigh of relief from the UFO community. I think they'll realize at that point that, well, gee, what did we get out of this? All we got out of this was the admission that we've been lied to for many, many years. We're still not getting to see the UFOs. We're still not interacting with these non-human intelligences. And that's what we really want. That'll be the first realization, even in the UFO community. Then, of course, you're going to have all the doubters that even this is real, that this is some kind of political agenda of Trump's, that he's lying to everybody. Of course, that's going to happen. Um, so day two would be a lot of that kind of confusion starting, and then it would progress from there as to people, again, getting on back onto the fence line or off the fence line on one side or the other, and it's just going to turn into another. We're almost going to be back to square one, I think, for a while. And then finally, I think we're going to have a second round of, well, now that we got that far, we need to honestly, I think, change our mindset and really, if if they admit that they are interfacing with these non-intelligences, we're going to have to ask them, well, can we please interact with them? Tell them we would like for them to sell a delegation and sit down with us so that we can publicly discuss all of this for not just the American people, but for the rest of the world. And then that would kind of leave it squarely in the NHI's ballpark as to whether they would agree to that. So again, you're talking about, it's not really in our ability to physically prove, because we're really talking about a completely different civilization or nation for that part, or for their part, that they're from another planet. They've got their own government, just like Russia, China, whatever. And they're going to run their own gambit all the way through their politics and all of that stuff. And if at the end of the day they say, no, we just want to stay away, we're happy with the agreements, no, we don't want to talk, we don't care, goodbye. That might be the response. Or it might be, yes, it's time. We need to get beyond all of this, and we need to state who we are, why we've been here, and what it is that we're looking for out of you guys, and why we interact the way we do with you. That's what the other option is. So there's going to be two ways it ends up. But it's all really squarely in the NHI's ballpark.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Well, look, Jason, I'm conscious of your time. I really, really, this has been fascinating. I've been trying to talk to you for quite a long time, so I really appreciate you.
It doesn't have to be the only time.
Yeah, no, I'd love to talk again. I really do appreciate it. And
Yeah.
I've been looking forward to this. So this is, yeah, fascinating stuff. Yeah. Amazing. Jason, thank you so much. Hopefully we'll talk again in the not too distant future.
Great talking to you, bro.
Good talking to you too. Take care of yourself.